I thought I was lifting my family up. It turned out that all they were doing was pulling me down. Let's get acquainted. My name is Julian Carr, I'm 37. And for most of my life, I played the role of the dependable son, the one everyone leaned on when things went sideways. I was the guy who remembered anniversaries, patched leaking faucets, bailed people out when unexpected bills arrived, and drove hours in the middle of the night because my brother's car gave up on the highway. It didn't bother me at first. I honestly believed that was what family was supposed to be, showing up, no matter the cost. My parents taught me that loyalty came with sacrifice, and I embraced that lesson, even if I was the only one living by it. It wasn't always strained. There was a time when I thought we were genuinely close. But slowly, in ways that were almost invisible at first, the tone began to sour. It started with those jokes that never really felt like jokes. At family dinners, my dad would smirk and say, "Julian's married to his job, that's why there are no grandkids yet." My mom would sigh dramatically whenever I missed Sunday brunch, even if I had a critical presentation due Monday. "Your brother makes time," she'd say, as though his part-time cafe shifts and shared apartment with 3 roommates carried the same weight as my responsibilities. For years, I laughed it off. I learned to swallow the sting and respond with a self-mocking smile rather than confrontation. But over time, the cracks showed. I paid for their vacations, reserved nice hotels, covered entire dinner tabs, and even took care of my brother's overdraft fees. What started as a one-time favor turned into a monthly routine. And despite all of that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still treated like an outsider in my own family. In the family group chats, my suggestions were usually brushed aside, like background noise. At Christmas, when my mother hand-lettered every place card for dinner, my name wasn't there. Even the stockings on the mantle, there wasn't one for me anymore. And yet, I kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays, fixing leaky roofs, stepping in during financial scares, I was always the one who came through. Until one day, I stopped. The unraveling began quietly. A few months back, I got an email from the family accountant, Aisha Patel. Routine stuff, or so I thought. Quarterly reports about the family trust. My grandfather, Walter Ashford, had established it long before I was born. The money was significant, but more importantly, it was a symbol, a thread meant to bind us together. I had been appointed one of the co-trustees, the other being my uncle, Reed Donnelly, who treated the responsibility like an annoyance. "Just sign the papers, Julian. You're the numbers guy," he'd grumble whenever I asked questions. And he wasn't wrong about my skills. Finance had been my career from the day I left college. Managing assets wasn't ambition for me, it was muscle memory. I never wanted more than my share. I never played angles or twisted rules. I simply kept the gears turning, because if I didn't, no one else would. But tucked inside that email was something I had never paid attention to before, a clause I was certain the rest of the family had skimmed right past. It quietly handed me final authority over distributions if certain conditions weren't met by the other trustee. I set it aside in my mind, unsure if I would ever have to use it. I wasn't chasing power. I just wanted peace. Funny thing about peace, though, it only lasts until someone decides they can profit from breaking it. And then came the message. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those gray, empty-feeling days where nothing crashes, but nothing quite lands right either. I had just finished a routine client call when my phone lit up. A group text. From my mother, Teresa Carr. "We've talked it over, and we think we need some distance. Please don't reach out anymore." That was it. No explanation. No kindness. Just a line of cold words dropped into my lap. Beneath it, my uncle Reed Donnelly had already reacted with a casual thumbs-up emoji, as if cutting me out of the family was something to agree on, like a dinner menu. My brother, Micah, said nothing. His silence felt louder than any insult. I stared at the message far longer than I'd like to admit, hoping it was some glitch, a bad joke, a mistake they'd laugh about later. But the more I looked, the more it sank in. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Planned. And then, like a puzzle snapping into place, I remembered the voice message from Micah a week earlier. Slurring his words through drunken laughter, "Mom says you're acting strange about the money. Making things complicated. You know, the whole family would run smoother if you just stopped trying to control everything." It all lined up. The sudden chill at the last family dinner. My name missing from my nephew's birthday invite. The way Reed had quietly started signing off on paperwork without looping me in. They weren't drifting from me, they were pushing me out. And they thought I'd just take it. Like always. I stared at that text one more time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. I could have written a page of explanations, reminders, proof of all the ways I'd held them together. But why? For people who had already decided I didn't matter? Instead, I typed one clean sentence. Of course. I'll stop the direct deposits immediately. And then I put the phone down. I didn't wait for their reply. That night, I sat down at my desk and logged into every single account tied to the family trust, the joint investments, the rainy day funds, even the so-called emergency reserves I had personally helped build. I wasn't acting out of spite. I was acting with precision. And then I saw it. My uncle, Reed Donnelly, had approved a $17,000 vacation advance just 2 days earlier. The receipts were laughably careless. Expenses listed as property maintenance. Yet the charges led straight to a casino in Foxwoods, Connecticut. My brother, Micah, had filed a $7,800 reimbursement for medical travel, except I knew, without a shred of doubt, that the destination was Coachella. That was the crack in the facade. The moment you realize the betrayal isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. By midnight, I had exercised my authority under the discretionary clause. The trust was frozen. An audit was flagged. The so-called vacation fund was rerouted into a holding account. Any transfer above $3,000 was automatically blocked. And the final strike? I updated the tax profile. Without the protections I had quietly maintained for years, the trust was now exposed to the full estate tax bracket. All the shielding, all the advantages they had enjoyed gone. At 4:02 a.m., the calls began. 17 from Micah. 6 from my mother. 1 from Reed. No voicemails, just the kind of relentless, red-faced calls that don't ask questions. They demand. I let the phone buzz until the battery drained. Later, when the messages started pouring in, I didn't open a single one. Instead, I typed one line into the group chat. No emojis. No punctuation to soften it. Wishing you the distance you wanted. And that was it. I set the phone on my nightstand, closed my eyes, and slept deeper than I had in months. It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes the first night of peace only comes after you set the fire yourself. The next morning, I did not check my phone. I went for a run instead, something I had not done in weeks. The air had a bite to it, the kind that stings your lungs and makes every breath feel brand new. I ran until my legs burned and my head emptied, my body awake in a way it had not been since before any of this started. I did not think about the fallout. Not yet. Not until I walked back into my apartment and saw 24 unread messages waiting. The tone had shifted overnight. The early ones were furious. My brother, what did you do? You cannot just mess with the trust. Then my mother, you are being dramatic, Julian. We asked for space, not whatever this is. Then my uncle, if this is your idea of a tantrum, you have gone too far. Expect to hear from our lawyer. But the later messages were different. Can we just talk? You are blowing this out of proportion. We did not mean to hurt you. And finally, from my father, Malcolm Carr, who had said nothing until then, please do not do anything you will regret. I read that one twice. I laughed. Then I deleted it. Here is what they never understood: I did not act out of spite. This was not pettiness dressed up as principle. I made a decision. A clean break. The distance they asked for, whether they realized it or not. Now, let me step back, because this is where the story stops being about money and starts being about intent. It began 2 years ago, just before my grandfather, Walter Ashford, passed away. He was a quiet man, stern, steady, kind in his own sparse way. No taste for spectacle, sharp right up to the end. In the last week of his life, he pulled me aside, eyes wet but clear, and pressed a single envelope into my hand. Not a legal brief. Not a notarized addendum. Just a handwritten note in his spare, no-nonsense script. "You are the only one I trust to protect the family from itself." That was all it said. No signature. No instructions. I kept it anyway, tucked at the back of my safe behind a stack of old bonds and property deeds. At the time, I assumed he meant the trust, or the tax shields, or the accounts I managed. But years later, I understood. He had seen them clearly long before I was willing to. Pay attention here, this is the hinge the rest of the story swings on. What I took was not just money. It was leverage, insurance, protection. Over the years, while I was the one drafting the documents, filing the reports, and keeping everything afloat, I started noticing discrepancies. Little things. A missing signature here. A double charge there. Accidental transfers that somehow always seemed to benefit my Uncle Reed Donnelly or my brother Micah Carr. So I started documenting everything quietly, thoroughly. I had copies of every expense report. I screen-recorded every bank transfer they made under my name. I kept a spreadsheet of every loan they never paid back. I even had emails where my mother, Teresa Carr, thanked me for covering property taxes they had told the rest of the family they had handled themselves. But the real prize? The ownership documents for the lake house. That house had always been presented as our family's shared vacation home, the place we all thought belonged to the trust. That was the story. What no one realized was that after my grandfather passed, I had quietly bought out the remaining mortgage with my own funds. Legally. Fully. I never changed the name on the mailbox. Never mentioned the title transfer. I just handled the payments while everyone else used it for summer getaways and holiday photos. My brother even proposed to his fiancée there. And it was mine. Fully paid off. Legally filed. The deed rests in my office drawer, notarized and untouched. They thought the trust owned it. They were wrong. So when I froze the family's accounts, yes, the trust was paralyzed, the vacation fund was gone, the estate protections reversed. But the lake house? That was never theirs to begin with. They had built memories on borrowed time. And now, well, now it is locked, empty, off limits. I changed the passcode to the front gate. Scheduled security upgrades. And for good measure, I listed it as an exclusive rental on a high-end platform starting at $3,000 a night. Booked solid for the next 5 months. I didn't do it to make money. I did it because my grandfather trusted me to protect the family from itself. That night, my mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, tearful, but controlled. "Julian, we didn't mean what we said. It's just. Things have been tense. We miss you. Your brother, he's struggling, you know that. And your uncle, he's under a lot of pressure. We shouldn't have pushed you out. Please call us. Let's fix this." I listened once. Then deleted it. Because hey, race the truth they still haven't faced, this wasn't about one message, or one account. This was years of being the backup plan. The safety net. The reliable disappointment they knew would always catch the fall, pay the debt, show up uninvited but needed. They cut the cord. I just made sure they couldn't grab it again when they started to fall. And now, they are starting to fall. 2 days later, the group chat exploded again. This time, with panic. It started with a message from my cousin Elise Donnelly, one of the few family members I actually liked. She rarely got involved in the drama, usually keeping her distance and showing up to family gatherings out of obligation more than enthusiasm. But even she was shaken. "Julian, hey. I don't know what's going on, but Aunt Shannon is flipping out. Something about the foundation paperwork. She said you locked her out of the documents folder. I hadn't expected that to come to light so soon. See, the Ashford Foundation wasn't a charity in the traditional sense. It was a tax shelter. Legal, but very gray. Something my Uncle Reed Donnelly had set up a decade ago to manage family giving. And it just so happened that I had been the one to set up the infrastructure and cloud storage back when none of them knew the difference between a password and a PDF. The documents folder? Yeah, I had full admin access. Always did. I never thought I'd need to use it. But after their message, I revoked every user permission and put the whole thing behind encryption. Legally, I didn't have the right to take anything. But they didn't have the right to use my name and ID on the initial filings either. And I had proof of that: screenshots, metadata, IP logs, everything. So when my aunt realized she couldn't access their financial records, the foundation account statements, or the expense tracking spreadsheets they needed to file their quarterly report, she must have absolutely lost it. I could almost picture her pacing in her kitchen in those awful leopard print slippers, screeching into her fourth glass of wine, flinging her phone at my uncle and yelling, "What did Julian do now?" And just like that, the cracks turned into a collapse. That night, I got an email from a law firm I had never heard of before. Some shiny boutique practice in Chicago, trying to sound scarier than they were. The subject line read, "Urgent Family Trust Access Inquiry." I did not even open it. I forwarded it to my own lawyer, Daniela Kovacs, with a quick message: "This is probably the first of many. Loop me in if anything serious comes through." The next day, my brother Micah showed up at my condo. I wasn't home, of course. I had anticipated something like this. The building has a concierge and security cameras. He wasn't exactly subtle about his arrival either. The desk called me with a note of concern. Apparently, he slammed his hand on the counter and demanded to be let up, shouting about family emergencies and stolen property. I watched the footage later. There he was, in a crumpled hoodie, looking more like a restless college dropout than a 33-year-old father of two. Red-faced, fidgeting, pacing the lobby like a teenager waiting for someone to cave. He waited 30 minutes. Then left. No call, no message. Just an Instagram story. He probably thought I wouldn't see it. A photo of our grandfather's urn, sitting on the mantel at my parents' house. The caption read, "Some people forgot where they came from." And that's when I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just them scrambling anymore. This was them trying to guilt me back. To shame me into retreat. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I went into my safe and pulled out the letter my grandfather, Walter Ashford, had given me, the same one I mentioned before. It was folded, slightly yellowed, the ink fading. I read it again. And then I flipped it over. Something I had never noticed before. Scrawled faintly in the corner were 5 numbers. It looked like a bank account. Or maybe a combination. A code. I do not know how I missed it. I must have looked at that paper 100 times over the years, but I had never turned it over. I scanned the number into my files, then went back to the stack of folders I had been collecting: files on the trust, the deeds, the business accounts my Uncle Reed Donnelly had opened without telling anyone. There it was. In an old ledger from 15 years ago. A hidden account. One that had never been touched. My heart started racing. I cross-referenced it with the estate filings and found a single-line item: emergency reserve. No details. No balance. No sign of who had access. Until now. That is what I took. Or rather, that is what I was given. Not just leverage. Not just proof. Not just a house or a trust or access. But a legacy my grandfather had quietly stashed away, hidden from the vultures who would have drained it dry. A nest egg no one else even remembered existed. Not a fortune, necessarily. But enough. Enough to change everything. And then came the message from my mother, Teresa Carr. Just 6 words: "We didn't raise you like this." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at those words. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a plea. It was a judgment. A subtle attempt to remind me of my role, the mold I was supposed to fit. The good son. The quiet one. The provider. The one who pays, who nods, who forgives. That sentence wasn't about guilt. It was about control. And that was the moment I knew. There was no going back. Not this time. Not after everything they had said and done. Not after they turned my loyalty into expectation, my generosity into obligation, and my silence into permission. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Daniela Kovacs. A sharp, unflinching woman I had met through a mutual client. She had a gift for anticipating what people would do before they did it, and a blunt honesty I appreciated. I laid out everything. What I had access to. What they had done. The backup documents. The shady deductions. The trust clause they had clearly never read. When I told her about the hidden account my grandfather had left, she went silent for a moment. Then she said, "You have more power than you realize. But if you're going to do this, Julian, you need to be ready to lose them. All of them." "I already have," I said. She didn't ask any more questions. Within a week, everything was in motion. Within days of my call with Daniela, the formal process began. She filed a petition to put the trust into receivership and to remove my uncle, Reed Donnelly, as co-trustee. The petition was airtight: every suspicious expense, every fake reimbursement, every sloppy transfer backed by receipts and spreadsheets I had kept for years. The final blow was proof that the lake house had been paid off with my own funds. The foundation's board, community names obsessed with reputation, received a packet of evidence. Their reaction was immediate. Pleas turned into legal threats, and then into panic. Reed resigned within 48 hours, not from honor but calculation. Fighting would cost more than surrender. My brother's incubator suspended him. Charity events tied to Reed were cancelled. For the first time, people began to step away. It wasn't instant victory. Hearings dragged on. Lawyers picked through receipts that exposed years of family support as personal indulgence. Publicly, they spun me as dramatic, but behind closed doors, trustees scrambled to protect themselves from liability. Reputation matters, especially when it cracks. Then came the lake house. Title, mortgage, payment records all under my name. The judge didn't need convincing. The property was mine alone. Watching entitlement collapse under notarized proof was sharper than any argument. When accounts froze, daily comforts at my parents' house stopped, subscriptions canceled, bills unpaid, even the cleaner gone. I didn't want revenge, I wanted the cycle to end. But the collapse came anyway. In weeks, the fallout reshaped everything. Reed negotiated a quiet exit. Micah moved into a small apartment and took odd jobs. My mother's messages grew clipped. My father kept his distance. No reconciliation speeches. Just silence, paperwork, and consequences. What did I learn? That quiet, documented power outlasts noise. That inheritance without stewardship rots. And that sometimes correction, not revenge, is the sharpest justice. With the sale of the lake house finalized, I redirected every dollar into something new. Something cleaner. Something worthy of my grandfather's name. We called it the Hayes Initiative, after his middle name. It was not another shelter. It was not a vanity project. It was a foundation with real governance, real audits, and a real mission, teaching financial literacy to kids and young adults who had never been given a fair shot at understanding money. We brought in teachers, mentors, professionals. We made budgets public. We set term limits for board members. And for the first time, I felt like the work I was doing mattered to people who actually valued it. The family? They faded into the background. A text here, a letter there, the occasional encounter at a wedding or funeral. But I did not look for reconciliation anymore. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay shut. Sometimes, I sit with that old photo me and my grandfather on the dock, legs dangling over the water. He is looking at me, not the camera. I think he knew all along what role I would be forced to play.